By the spring of 1945, the empire Adolf Hitler had promised would last 1,000 years was collapsing in real time. The banners that once symbolized conquest now hung over shattered cities. Supply depots were empty. Rail networks lay twisted and broken under relentless bombardment. Entire divisions existed only on paper. In Berlin, beneath layers of concrete and steel, Hitler retreated into a bunker as artillery thundered closer each day. The question was no longer whether Nazi Germany would fall. The question was how it had unraveled so completely, and how the United States had helped make that collapse inevitable. When America entered World War II after Pearl Harbor, Germany had already conquered most of Europe. Blitzkrieg tactics had stunned the world. France had fallen in weeks. Britain stood battered but defiant. To many observers in 1941, Nazi Germany appeared unstoppable. But what Germany had not yet faced was the full industrial and military weight of the United States. America did not merely mobilize troops. It transformed itself into the largest war production engine in human history. Automobile factories retooled to build tanks. Typewriter companies manufactured machine gun parts. Shipyards produced Liberty ships at astonishing speed, sometimes completing vessels in weeks instead of months. By 1944, American industry was producing nearly 100,000 aircraft per year. Tank production dwarfed that of Germany. The United States outproduced the Axis powers in ships, planes, trucks, artillery, and ammunition. This industrial dominance would become the foundation of Germany's defeat. In the skies over Europe, American bombers carried out sustained strategic bombing campaigns designed not simply to destroy cities, but to dismantle Germany's capacity to wage war. Oil refineries became primary targets. Without fuel, tanks could not move. Aircraft could not fly. Supply trucks stalled. Rail yards were bombed repeatedly, crippling the flow of resources from factories to front lines. The German war machine, once fueled by rapid mobility, began to suffocate. By 1944, American fighter escorts such as the P-51 Mustang extended deep into German territory, protecting bomber formations and challenging the Luftwaffe directly. Germany's once dominant air force suffered devastating losses. Control of the skies gradually shifted. Air superiority allowed Allied forces to move with increasing confidence across Western Europe. Then came June 6, 1944, the invasion of Normandy. D-Day forced Germany to confront a full-scale Allied assault in Western Europe, while still locked in a brutal war against the Soviet Union in the East. The opening of that Western Front changed everything. Germany was now caught between two advancing giants. Resources had to be divided. Troops were redeployed. Fuel reserves dwindled faster. Every mile lost in France narrowed Germany's defensive depth. American forces pushed inland through hedgerows and fortified towns, eventually liberating Paris in August 1944. The symbolic blow was immense. France, once occupied and humiliated, was free again. The Allied advance continued toward the German border, stretching German defensive lines thinner with each passing week. In December 1944, Hitler launched one final desperate offensive in the Ardennes, the Battle of the Bulge. The objective was to split Allied forces and regain momentum. Initially, the attack achieved surprise. Fog grounded Allied aircraft. German armored units advanced through snow-covered forests. But the offensive required fuel that Germany no longer possessed in adequate supply. American resistance stiffened rapidly. Key positions, such as Bastogne, held firm despite being surrounded. When skies cleared and Allied air power returned, the German advance stalled. The failure of the Ardennes offensive exhausted Germany's remaining reserves. After that moment, the Third Reich no longer had the strength to launch major offensives in the West. By early 1945, American forces crossed the Rhine River, a psychological and strategic milestone. The Rhine had long been seen as Germany's natural defensive barrier. Once Allied troops established bridgeheads across it, the path into Germany's industrial heartland lay open. American armored divisions advanced quickly, capturing cities, cutting supply lines, and encircling German units before they could regroup. As American troops moved deeper into Germany, they encountered the concentration camps. The liberation of camps such as Buchenwald and Dachau exposed the full horror of Nazi policy. Emaciated survivors, mass graves, crematoria. The evidence of systematic extermination could not be denied. Soldiers who had fought for strategic objectives now confronted the moral dimension of the war in undeniable form. The collapse of Nazi Germany became more than a military victory. It became the dismantling of a regime built on racial ideology and industrialized murder. Meanwhile, Soviet forces pressed from the east, capturing territory at staggering cost. Germany was being compressed from both directions. American troops met Soviet soldiers at the Elbe River in April 1945, effectively cutting Germany in half. Communication lines within the Reich fractured. Units surrendered in growing numbers. Desertions increased. Infrastructure disintegrated. In Berlin, Hitler issued orders to divisions that no longer existed. He imagined counteroffensives that had no fuel, no reserves, and no realistic chance of success. The regime that once commanded vast armies now relied on teenage conscripts and shattered remnants. On April 30th, 1945, Adolf Hitler committed suicide in his bunker as Soviet forces closed in on Berlin. Days later, German High Command signed unconditional surrender documents. On May 8, 1945, Victory in Europe Day was declared. The fall of Hitler was not the result of a single dramatic battle. It was the cumulative effect of sustained pressure. American industrial dominance, strategic bombing, naval superiority, logistical strength, and relentless ground advances systematically dismantled Germany's ability to continue fighting. Combined with Allied coordination and Soviet offensives in the East, the outcome became mathematically inevitable. Nazi Germany had relied on speed, intimidation, and early momentum. But it had underestimated the scale of American mobilization. It had underestimated what happens when a continental industrial giant commits fully to war production. It had underestimated the consequences of fighting a prolonged war against enemies capable of replacing losses faster than they could be inflicted. By 1945, the imbalance was overwhelming. Fuel shortages crippled German mobility. Airfields were destroyed. Factories were reduced to rubble. Rail lines were unusable. The war machine that once seemed unstoppable had been dismantled piece by piece. The ruins of Berlin, photographed in the aftermath, stand as visual proof of how totalitarian ambition can collapse under sustained force. The defeat of Hitler reshaped global politics, led to the division of Germany, and ushered in a new geopolitical era dominated by American and Soviet influence. But from the perspective of the Western Front, one fact remains clear. Once American power was fully engaged in Europe, the clock began ticking. The defeat of Nazi Germany was no longer a distant hope. It became an outcome driven by production capacity, strategic coordination, and relentless advancement. The Third Reich had promised permanence. What it delivered was ruin. And by May 1945, the war in Europe was over.